Keokuk. All right, Keokuk. Because I remember being on a subway in New York once, and it was in Lower Manhattan, and I saw the name of the station that we were pulling into, and it was spelled Houston. And I'm from Texas, so I said, Houston. They said, we're stopping at Houston Station. What are you talking about? So I know how important it is to get these things right. Thank you all very much for being here. I'm Julian Castro. Let's give a big round of applause to Claire, one of our interns here. Thank you very much for making the pitch. It's been great work that you're doing, and all of our interns who are here. And I want to thank you, Mary Jo, as well, for helping to organize this and for your introduction, and for the Lee County Democrats, all of the great work that y'all have done to make 2018 a fantastic year for Democrats. I know there were some advances that were made in this state. 3 out of 4 congressional districts are now Democratic, which is something to be very proud of. Of course, we still have that one. I was saying last year that the 2 races that I most wanted to see us win in 2018 were Ted Cruz to go down to Texas and Steve King here in Iowa. And y'all have an opportunity to do that next time in 2020. So I'm Julian Castro. I feel like I need a name tag oftentimes because I have a twin brother. Some of y'all may have seen my twin brother, Joaquin. He represents the 20th Congressional District of Texas, and he's often on Wolf Blitzer or MSNBC, and he likes to say that the way to tell us apart is that I'm 1 minute uglier than he is, which is not true. We're twins, but I'm 1 minute older. And when I was in Washington, D.C. as HUD Secretary, I used to say the real way to tell us apart was that he was the one in Congress, so I was the one with the real job. But he and I grew up on the west side of San Antonio with my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother had come over from Mexico when she was 7 years old with her little sister because their parents had died. And their closest relatives lived there in Texas, in San Antonio. They brought her over in 1922. They yanked her out of school, unfortunately, so she never finished elementary school. She worked as a maid, a cook, and a babysitter for her entire career, and raised my mom as a single parent. My mom raised my brother and me as a single parent after the age of 8 when our parents split up. Joaquin and I are proud products of the public schools of Texas. And then had the opportunity to go away to college and to law school at Stanford and Harvard Law School with my brother because I couldn't get rid of him. And then came back home and got elected to the city council in San Antonio at 26 and served for 4 years. I ran for mayor when I was 30 years old, trying to become the youngest elected mayor in that city's history, running against a gentleman that was 70 years old and trying to become the second oldest. And he won in a close runoff and ended up being a good mayor. But we had strict term limits, so I came back 4 years later, and I became mayor of my hometown and served for 5 years until I got a call on April 16th, 2014 from President Barack Obama. And I always tell people that I remember the date because it's not every day that the president calls you and asks you if you want a job. I had just driven through the drive-thru at Panda Express. You know how on your phone, when it's an unrecognized number, it says unknown or it says block call, it said private. Right? So if you ever get a phone call that says private, like answer the phone. I'm hoping it'll be me on the other end of the line. I did answer the call, and I served 2.5 years as the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. And during that time, had a chance to manage a department of 8,000 employees, a $48 billion budget with 54 field offices across the country, and to visit and work with 100 different communities in 39 states across our country. And I got a deep sense of the way that communities big and small are grappling not only with housing, of course, but also with everything that is connected to that. The fact that where you live often determines the quality of your kids' education. It often determines job opportunities that you have. Folks who live in small towns in America, bless you, know that too oftentimes it determines the quality and access to health care that you get. Because we know, for instance, that here in Iowa, there have been rural hospitals that have shuttered or at least closed inpatient psychiatric care or OBGYN care. So people have to drive farther and farther to access quality health care. Where you live often determines the transit opportunities that you have. And in some places like Flint, Michigan, which I visited about a month ago and I had visited when I was HUD Secretary during the Flint water crisis, it determines something as basic as whether you have access to clean water. Right? And I'm running for president because I believe that it's time for a new vision with new energy and time for a president that understands that we need to move forward as one nation with one destiny in this 21st century. I'm convinced that as a nation, our destiny is to be the smartest, the healthiest, the fairest, and the most prosperous nation on earth. The smartest, the healthiest, the fairest, and the most prosperous nation on earth. If we're going to be the smartest nation on earth, and we know that we need to be because jobs require more skill and more knowledge than ever before, all types of jobs, it means that we need to start early with universal pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds. It means that we need to invest in K through 12 education by paying teachers what they deserve, by ensuring that we continue to invest in school facilities and reduce class sizes, and also ensuring that no matter what the needs of a child are, that those needs can be met at the school they go to. Because too oftentimes, the parents of special needs children feel like they have to be lawyers to argue with a bureaucracy to get what they need for their child. And we can do better than that. We also know that there was a time in our country where we had a bigger commitment to higher education. Y'all will remember, many folks in this room will remember that it was just a generation or two ago when a lot of public state university systems were either tuition free or close to that. That's not a radical idea. There were a lot of public state university systems that were once that way. In my home state of Texas, for instance, folks will tell you that just in the 1980s, it was like $50 or $100 per credit hour, right, per semester, for tuition. That's gotten out of control. We need to make an investment in tuition-free public state universities, community colleges, and job training and certification programs. And we need to supplement that with returning trade programs to our high schools so that folks who are going to choose not to go to college can have a running start and get a skill that they can get into employment with. And as y'all know, there are a lot of jobs right now that go unfilled because people are not trained for them like they used to be. We can do that again, and we need to do it in our country. If we're going to be the healthiest nation on earth, we need a different healthcare system. You know, the grandmother that I grew up with, she had severe type 2 diabetes. And my brother and I watched as she got older and we got older, her condition got worse and worse. Until right before she died in early 1996, she had to have one of her feet amputated, which, as many folks know, is common for severe diabetics. But that whole time, she had Medicare. I want to strengthen Medicare for the people who are on it now, and then make sure that Medicare is available to everyone that wants it in our nation. I also believe, though, if somebody has a private health insurance plan that they're comfortable with, that they like, that they should be able to hold on to that we can do both of those things. What I don't believe is that the profits of the pharmaceutical companies or the healthcare companies should ever determine whether somebody in this country, the wealthiest nation on earth, should get the health care and the medication that they need when they need it. In fact, I saw an article the other day about insulin, and it caught my eye because my grandmother used to have to inject herself with insulin, as a diabetic. The cost of insulin in the United States has more than doubled in the last few years, almost tripled, I think. And it's only a fraction of the cost in Canada of what it is here in our country. And you can write that story, not only for insulin, but a whole bunch of other drugs that people need. Why is that? Why is that when you, the taxpayers, are making an investment in the research and development that goes into those drugs? It shouldn't be like that. We can do better than that. We can also do better than we've done to end this distinction between physical health care and mental health care, and invest in mental health care services so that people don't have to suffer in stigma and silence and not get the service they need. Because a mental health challenge can be just as debilitating, as folks know, I'm sure, if you have family members or friends or coworkers, just as debilitating as a physical one. So we need to focus on ending that distinction. If we want to be the fairest nation on earth, we need to reimagine our justice system so that everybody is innocent until proven guilty. Right now, if you're wealthy, you have a much greater chance a lot of times of being found not guilty than somebody who is poor. We need to invest in public defenders, invest in sentencing reform, in cash bail reform. I also believe that we should do things like legalize marijuana and invest in diversion programs, right, that instead of putting people in prison for low-level offenses, actually gets them the help they need to stay on a productive path in life. There are a lot of folks out there that have been caught up, of all different backgrounds, have gotten caught up in the criminal justice system, and then they go to prison, and the result of that is that they have a big X on their record, and they're not able to get a job, and they're not able to get housing. And how do we ever expect people to get back on their feet and to actually be productive members of society? That doesn't mean that we let people off for serious crimes. We need to punish people who commit serious crimes, for sure. But I think we can be smarter about making sure that people's lives are not wasted because they get taken up with low-level offenses that they should never be in prison for in the first place. I served as mayor of San Antonio. I know that we have a lot of great police officers out there. I worked with a lot of them. I also know that anybody who watches video after video after video that has come out knows that too often times in our country, especially young black men, are treated differently at the hands of law enforcement. And I'm the only candidate that has put out a proposal for police reform so that we work with police departments across the country to mend the rift that too often exists between police departments and some communities, and that we increase accountability for police departments in terms of the use of lethal force so that we have one standard of lethal force across the United States. I mean, why should a police department here in Keokuk, can I get closer? Or Mount Pleasant, or Des Moines, or San Antonio, why should police departments in different places have a different standard of how they're going to actually decide whether they're going to use their weapon on somebody under different circumstances? That doesn't make sense. I think we need to respect that person's life just, anywhere, wherever you are, whatever your background is. If we're going to be the fairest nation on earth, it also means that we need to do things like pass the Equal Rights Amendment and ensure that women get equal pay for equal work. I grew up with a mom that was raising us as a single parent, and I saw the stress that she faced raising my brother and me as a single parent and also providing for her mom, my grandmother. I remember, because we didn't have a car, taking the bus. I think in 1985, I would have been about 11 years old, taking the bus with my mom and my brother to go get a wig for my mom because all of her hair had fallen out. And the doctors didn't know why. Just did not know. They ultimately told her that it was stress related. Fortunately, she grew it back. And fortunately for her, it took a long time for it to get gray too when she got it back. But, that's the story of so many women that are working hard, either as head of household or just in a household. Right? And to think that women get 80 cents on the dollar of what a guy makes, that is unjust. Y'all saw our U.S. women's national soccer team that won about a week ago now, a few days ago. They're great examples. Right? Even though they are the ultimate winners, they actually make less than the men's soccer team. Even though it's drawing in more revenue, getting more TV coverage, inspiring more people, people should be paid the same no matter who they are, based on the work that they're doing. I think all of us can agree with that. if we're going to be the fairest nation, it also means that we should do things like pass the Equality Act that would ensure no matter what your sexual orientation is or your gender identity, that you're treated the same way when you go look for an apartment or a house, or you can't be discriminated against in your place of employment. We don't need to have second-class citizens in America. And then finally, if we're going to be the most prosperous nation on earth, it means prosperity for everybody. We're here in a small community. We need to do things like make sure that when economic development happens in a state, that it doesn't just happen in the cities. In my home state of Texas the other day, a newspaper did an expose. You all hear about the Texas miracle of all the jobs that have been created over there. And it's true, a lot of jobs have been created in Texas. But those jobs have mostly gone to the big cities, Houston, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, and the suburbs around there. Texas is a big state that is very rural also. There hasn't been much that's gone to small town communities. And I bet that y'all see that in Iowa as well. Even though we have seen factories closing down in small communities, we've seen hospitals closing down, we've seen community colleges struggling. So I say that we need to partner to invest with states to make sure that when they do economic development, that they incentivize, if they're going to use incentives, companies to actually get more serious about locating in smaller communities. Of course, it has to work, right, with that company, but I don't think that we ever try hard enough. I believe that we can do a better job of making sure that those jobs are more evenly spread in these states, including in my home state of Texas. And that we can do things like invest in rural hospitals and ensure that as we transition to a different healthcare system, for instance, that the Medicare reimbursement rates work for rural hospitals. So they're not put out of business, but they're able to provide the care that they all need. And that we build out infrastructure in rural America, the roads, the bridges that farmers and others need to get their goods to market and to get where they're going. 21st century infrastructure like rural broadband, because fortunately we live in a time when it's easier to do work remotely than ever before. Ensuring that people can get decent cell phone service, because there's still a lot of smaller communities where you can't get that. And you know what, oddly enough, I understand some of that growing up even in a big city, because even in big cities, for instance, what will happen is that one of these internet service providers will go in, like AT&T or Google or any of the others, and they start laying fiber in different parts of the city, but leaving out some communities. I remember growing up, in the neighborhood that I grew up in, I remember seeing, this is going to sound a little bit weird, but I'm going to make a point. I remember seeing a Domino's Pizza disclaimer that they would not deliver in certain neighborhoods in my city, in San Antonio. And so whether you live in a city and in a neighborhood that has been left behind, or you live in a small town that too oftentimes is forgotten or left behind or not focused on enough, we need to ensure that prosperity in this country means prosperity for everybody. And I am absolutely committed to that if I'm President of the United States. I also believe that we need to do things like raise the minimum wage. We haven't raised the minimum wage in 10 years. We need to ensure that labor can organize effectively, because unions have been a ticket to the middle class for so many Americans over the years. I was proud to join, about a month and a half ago, workers who were striking against McDonald's, trying to fight for $15 an hour minimum wage and better working conditions. And before that, I joined workers at the University of California, San Francisco, who were also protesting over there. Today, our campaign is joining in solidarity with Amazon workers. Y'all know today are these prime days, which are like the biggest days for Amazon. Right? Well, the workers are calling attention to the fact that they're in these warehouses, they don't even get decent bathroom breaks a lot of the time. Right? Just basic working conditions. Whether you're a farm worker in California, or you're an Amazon worker working in this climate-controlled warehouse, we need to ensure that workers have the ability to organize in a strong way. And that they're paid. And if we're going to be the most prosperous nation on earth, it means that we need to address the most existential threat to our country and the world, which is climate change. I would recommit to the Paris Climate Accord. I would invest in getting to net zero by 2050 and creating jobs in the clean energy economy. But I come from Texas. Texas is the leader in the traditional energy economy. There's no reason that Texas, that Iowa, that other states should not lead in the clean energy economy. Y'all see that here? You see the possibilities. We see that there in Texas. I don't want China to lead in these jobs. I don't want another country to lead in these jobs. I want our Americans to have those jobs. Then, let me just say, lastly, that if we're going to be the most prosperous nation on earth, it means that we need a positive, strong plan for immigration that maintains border security, but that treats people with common sense and with compassion instead of cruelty. And I saved this one for last, y'all, because you know that this has been in the news. This president is absolutely determined to run on this issue. And I'll just tell you that I made a decision to say, look, if he's going to run on this issue, I'm not going to run away from him or it. I have my own plan that is bold, that is different from his, that is positive about how we can handle this. Right? And he's betting that Americans will vote out of fear or paranoia or division or dislike. I'm betting that no matter what the color of your skin is, no matter if you live in a small town or a big city, how much money you make, that there are more of us that actually want to do the right thing, want to treat people with basic respect and not have kids sleeping on the floor and men that are in front of cameras telling them that they're hungry and that they haven't been allowed to shower in weeks or even use a toothbrush. And children, you've heard the audio tape, crying out for their parents. They're going to be scarred for life. Does anybody, whether you're conservative or liberal or Republican or Democrat, I don't think anybody believes that this is the best way that we can do things in our country. Did you you saw the images the other day of those men that were behind what looks like a fenced-in pen or a cage? That Vice President Pence was there with his blazer and his khaki pants, and John Cornyn is there, and Lindsey Graham is there. They're looking at these men. They don't take the time to even try and talk to them, even though there was a translator there with them, so they could have. That's not who we are. That's not who we should be. Throughout our history, whether it was, division against Germans way back early in our history, against the Irish, against the Chinese, folks that used to tell people to go back to Africa, go back to Mexico. Last year, when those folks were marching and they were saying Jews will not replace us, there have always been people that profited politically off of trying to divide us. And the question for us is, are we going to rise up and do what generations before have done and overcome that? And get stronger as a country together and move forward and expand opportunity for everybody. So my immigration plan, just briefly, number one would go to the root cause of the challenge, which is that people cannot find safety and opportunity in Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador. I would partner with them in a 21st century Marshall Plan so that people could find safety and opportunity at home instead of having to come to the United States. I would also honor asylum claims, stop playing games with people that want to make an asylum claim, but add the number of judges and support staff in our court system so that those asylum claims can be heard more quickly, so that people are not waiting in limbo for years. If the answer is yes, then they should be told yes. If the answer is no, then they should get an answer no, right? But they should not be waiting in limbo for years. I would also put undocumented immigrants who have not committed a serious crime on a pathway to earn citizenship. And we would do things like bring back the thousands of deported veterans. You know that there are communities of deported veterans living in Mexico? Communities of them. Thousands of them that served our country. and want the opportunity to try and become citizens, but they were deported. I would bring them back and allow them the opportunity to apply for citizenship in the United States. And I would also fix our legal immigration system, because, you know, I hear people all the time, and I understand this. They say, hey, look, you know, I understand what you're saying about people seeking asylum or undocumented immigrants. We don't want to be cruel. But what about the legal immigration system? You know, I have a relative or I have a friend or coworker that applied for citizenship and it's taken forever. And I agree with that. We need to do both of those things. We need to address this situation with people seeking asylum and with undocumented immigrants. And we also need to fix our broken legal immigration system so that it doesn't take forever for people to actually become, you know, apply and then become citizens. We can do both of those things. And I believe that there are people of goodwill and good conscience, no matter what background people are from. I'm going to bet on that, even as the president bets on cruelty, and I think that we're going to win on that issue. Thank you all for having me here today. It's been great to come by. I look forward to answering questions that folks have. Let me just say that I don't want to make our country anything again. I want to make us better than we've ever been. I don't want to go backward. I want to go into the future stronger than ever. There's one exception, which is that I want to return integrity and decency to the Oval Office. One last quick story. I got tested very early on in public service. I went back home after I graduated from law school. I started working at the biggest law firm in town. I was making $100,000 a year in the year 2000. I had a student loan payment of, I think, about $950. By the way, my education plan addresses student loan debt relief. I bought a house, I bought a new car, all those things that you would hope to be able to do, I was doing, you know, as a young man starting off my career. And then I got elected to the San Antonio City Council. And the San Antonio City Council only paid at that time, even though it was a city of more than 1 million people, it only paid $20 per meeting. The most you could make was $1,040 a year. Even though it was basically like a full-time job of a city of over 1 million people, they had a throwback charter from 1951 that they had never changed. So everybody had another job, and my job was at the law firm. Well, a few months after I got elected, the law firm got a client. And the client wanted those of us on the city council to approve a land deal. The land deal was that they wanted us to incentivize them building a golf course over our water supply, because we relied on an underground aquifer for water. And, you know, there were like 1 or 2 other golf courses in that area from before. But I had concerns that the environmental plan that they had presented was not strong enough. And so the chemicals that you use to keep a golf course nice, that might seep into what's known as the recharge zone over there, and might compromise the integrity of the drinking water. And so I was against it. I wanted to vote against the deal, and my constituents wanted me to vote against it too. But under the rules of conduct for lawyers, the professional rules of conduct, basically ethics, lawyers do have an ethics code, believe it or not. I know, sometimes it doesn't seem like it. Under those professional rules, you couldn't just go against the interests of a client of the law firm. You know, even if I didn't represent them personally, they were the same law firm. So I was stuck. You know, on the one hand, my constituents were telling me, hey man, are you gonna, you know, this is important to us. Are you gonna vote against this? This is about our water supply. And on the other hand, my livelihood basically depended on me shutting up. Basically telling them, look, you know, I respect your position, but I'm at this law firm and I can't help you out on this issue. I'm sure that we can work on other issues in the future together. So I was stuck, but in January of 2002, a couple of months after that conflict arose, I quit my job. I walked in the law firm and quit my job, and then I went and I voted against that land deal on the city council.